Good morning. Good morning. Won't you share with a friend or two? Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. You. Good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning, good morning, good morning, and welcome, welcome, welcome to Daring Dialogues. I'm your host today, Shantae Charles, and I hope that you have been having a great and wonderful day. We're going to be back in and taking a look at some more women's history and some more women who have made history. We've got quite a few. And then we're going to hop into What Happened to You? Conversations in Trauma, Resilience, and Healing by Dr. Bruce D. Perry in conversation with Oprah Winfrey. This is another book that I recommend you get if you are interested in understanding the neuroscience behind trauma, understanding why people are doing what they're doing, why you might be doing some of the things that you're doing. This has been a really, really impactful and very helpful conversation around trauma. So we're going to hop back into that. Obviously, we will probably carry it over to season 12 just to finish up this book because do think it is important to finish it. So last time or yesterday, we left off talking about Money of Her Own, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. And we found out that in 1964, women were finally granted some rights in terms of having their own financial freedom. Now, why is this important? Because a lot of women, unfortunately, kind of were relegated to staying in bad relationships because they had no control over their money or their finances most of the time. We have to remember that American society pretty much saw women as property. And they're trying to go back to that, but we're not going. Mm-mm, mm-mm. Get somebody else to do it. We can't go back. All right, so let's find out what happened in 1975. A jury of her peers. Throughout the 20th century, American women campaigned to be allowed to serve as jurors. Did you know we couldn't serve as jurors? Wow. Imagining something happening to you in this country and you cannot serve as a juror. Now, a lot of people skip over jury duty, but there was a time when they wouldn't even allow women to be a juror. I don't skip jury duty. I've served like 3 or 4 times now. It is a privilege. It is a privilege. Don't skip jury duty, people. Yeah. By 1942, only 28 states permitted women to do so. And it was not until 1968 that all 50 states were on board. The reasoning against letting women serve on the jury, in the words of, guess who, a Florida court in 1961, was that the woman, quote, is still regarded as the center of the home and family life, and that they could not be expected to serve as jurors because they have to, quote, cook the dinners. Although women were technically allowed to serve on the jury, they had different exemptions than men. Women were allowed to opt out of jury duty and were often discouraged from serving. In Florida, for example, a woman could not serve as a juror unless she previously declared in writing her desire to do so. Only in 1975 did the Supreme Court deem this unconstitutional and end the different jury service policies for women and men. Again, 1970s, people. We are not that removed from oppressive policies for women. Let's look at another one. 1978, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. Yes, we had to have an act for that too. Before 1978, there were no official laws that protected the rights of pregnant women in the workplace or in the workforce. The Pregnancy Discrimination Act, or PDA, of 1978 sought to change that. It amended the Title 7 of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prohibit sex discrimination on the basis of pregnancy. The PDA was written in response to a Supreme Court decision in General Electric Company versus Gilbert. General Electric offered its employees a disability plan but did not cover disabilities related to pregnancy. A group of female employees sued the company for sex discrimination. The Supreme Court argued it wasn't sex discrimination, but Congress disagreed and created the PDA 2 years later. In 1993, the Family and Medical Leave Act increased employment protections against pregnant women. Today, there is still much to be done to further rights for women in the workplace in regards to pregnancy, maternity leave, and child care. Believe it or not, the U.S. has, as far as the quote unquote developed countries of the world, we have some of the worst policies when it comes to pregnancy, maternity leave, paternity leave, and child care. There are other countries that give like men paternity leave for like a year off. So we are way behind when it comes to recognizing the time that people need in order to take care of their newborns. 1980, her story, National Women's History Week. Now remember, Black History also started off as a Black History Week. It did not start out as a month. Before there was National Women's History Month, there was National Women's History Week. It was proclaimed by President Jimmy Carter and held from March 2nd through the 8th in 1980. How did it begin? Feminist activists in Northern California were indignant with history books leaving out American women. In 1978, they set out to create a Women's History Week in order to celebrate women's cultural achievements and contributions to history. The idea spread across the country, and other communities celebrated their own Women's History Week the following year. In 1980, an alliance of women's groups and historians successfully lobbied for national recognition. 7 years later, Congress declared March of each year to be National Women's History Month. So this did not happen out of the goodwill of the American heart. No. Just like everything else, people had to get out, get the word out, organize, and lobby in order for this to happen. Jimmy Carter said this: "Too often, the women were unsung and sometimes their contributions went unnoticed. But the achievements, leadership, courage, strength, and love of the women who built America was as vital as that of the men whose names we know so well." So when you look at this month and you think, oh, why do we have to do this? Why do we recognize women in this month? Understand, there was no recognition going forward before 1978. None. Thank you. And I picked this shirt up. At, believe it or not, Rainbow Stores. And I was like, this would be perfect for Women's History Month. It's actually got women all over it, the front and the back side. I'll probably take a picture today and put it on my IG just so you can see the whole thing. But people were not recognizing us. So when you see things like Black Girls Rock and all of these sort of presentations about women, we are growing up. If you were born 1978 or later, I was born 1977. You're growing up in a world that recognizes women on a regular basis. So that means the generations before us grew up in a world where they didn't do that. And so what we see as a normal occurrence was not a normal occurrence before 1978. Okay? I'm 45. So that means less than 50 years, there's been a consistent relationship of honoring and recognizing women in the United States of America. That is not a long period of time. All right. So sometimes we look at it, and because we've dealt with it or been in the experience of it for our entire life, we think it's the norm. Just like there's a generation of children who are growing up who will never know really what it was like to stick their finger in a little hole for the phone and pull your finger all the way around and have the thing roll back just to get one number, right? They won't really know that experience unless they go to a museum and they find the phone and they actually try it out for themselves. They won't know that experience. So I don't want us to take March for granted as a month that is set aside to honor women. So honor the women in your life. Tell them how much they mean to you. If they're in your vicinity, give them some flowers, send them some flowers by mail, however you want to do it. But make sure that you do take some time this month to actually honor the women in your life. 1983, let's look at Alice Walker and womanism. Now, Alice Walker, from my understanding, has come under some fire recently as some things have come out about her abusing her daughter. Not only her, but also Nina Simone. You know, these are two women that a lot of people admire for their gifts, for their talents, for what they've done for women's history overall. But both of them do have or have had issues where they have abused their children. A lot of people look at that and they say, well, you know, we also have to take into consideration that I know with Nina Simone that she was dealing with mental health issues, and that's understandable. We also have to take into account that we know more now about just children's health, the results of putting your hands on children and what kind of damage that does to them mentally. There are still some people that still beat their kids and still think it's the, best way to quote unquote get a message across. But if you look at the science actually shows you're actually creating brain damage within your child. So I always tell parents, listen, if you say you want the smartest kid in the batch, then you might want to stop hitting your kid because you're not doing anything to help their brain capacity. You're actually doing damage. I know. People have been brought up that beating is the best way, but the science says otherwise. Now, just like we look at the science on other things, smoking cigarettes causes cancer. We have data that shows that. We don't keep smoking cigarettes after we know it causes cancer, right? Right? I would hope not. I understand addictions and all that. But most people, when they realize, smoking causes cancer, let me stop that. Or let me get on some kind of treatment plan to stop. Now that we know that you can literally damage your child's brain by spanking, it's time to do something different. It's that simple. Back to Alice Walker. Author and activist Alice Walker, who is still alive, born in 1944, coined the term womanism as an alternative to feminism. In her 1983 book, In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, which has actually been turned into a really, really powerful, it's either on Netflix or Amazon, but I watched it. It's very, very powerful. In Search of Our Mother's Gardens, Walker saw feminism as a limited and white-centric movement. She famously wrote, "Womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender," meaning that womanism encompasses and expands feminism in addition to being an alternative. In Walker's words, womanism is simply another shade. It helps give visibility to the experience of Black women and other women of color who have always been at the forefront of the feminist movement, yet marginalized and rendered invisible in historical texts and the media. Walker also wrote that a womanist is a woman who loves other women, and not only loves other women, but she's not trying to discard men. Therefore, I am not a feminist. I am a womanist. Walker used the metaphor of a garden where all flowers bloom equally. She hopes that one day the world will be a place where women and men of all races and cultures are equal. So, again, there's this whole movement right now of some people, looking at black women and saying, "Oh, you guys are feminists. Down with the feminists." And I'm like, "No. No, we're not going to do that." But we also do need to recognize and expand on feminism, which I think womanism does a good job of. Um, Recognizing that everybody has a place. So it's not, I'm better than you. It's no, I have a place in society just like you have a place in society. And the rights need to be equal. Equal. Not you lower than me or me lower than you. Not you less than me or me less than you. Now, let us hop into what happened to you. Man, yeah, I definitely do not want us to, I don't want us to not finish this book. So we are definitely going to read it into season 12. We are on the section that is talking about our brains, our biases, our systems, and I believe we have gone through that. No, we have not. We just finished up. Yes. So we are in our brains, our biases, and our systems. We just finished up post-traumatic wisdom. And now we are talking about our brains, the biases that we have as human beings, and our systems. I often say, and I often sum up our human biases by saying, humans are gonna human. I don't care who they are. As long as they are human, they're going to have biases. And we can say as much as we want that we don't have some sort of biases, but we do because we are human. We see things through our own lens, through our own experiences, through our own trials. Those things have been written within us and on us and in our minds. And so a lot of times when we are sharing with people, we are sharing through the lens and the framework of where we come from and what we have lived through. That does not necessarily mean we are wrong. It means we're human. That's it. And so once we get that this person is living out and sharing through their human experience, and I'm going to share through mine, it doesn't mean that I have to label you as wrong. I just have to understand your perspective. So Oprah says this: it is approaching people with the awareness that what happened to you is important, that influences your behavior and your health. Using that awareness to act accordingly and respond appropriately, whether you're a parent, a teacher, a friend, a therapist, a doctor, a police officer, a judge. Yes, that captures as well as any other brief statement the essence of what it means to be trauma informed. The act accordingly part is so important. It's one thing to be aware that trauma can result in certain behaviors and problems. It's another thing to ask people, what do we do now? How do we create opportunities for healing within our systems? How can we avoid repeating unpredictable, uncontrollable stressors that exacerbates the effects of trauma? How do we make sure we don't re-traumatize someone by unintentionally continuing marginalizing them, dehumanizing them, and that gives rise to the very problems we're supposed to be addressing. I believe that if you don't recognize the built in biases in yourself and the structural biases in your systems, things regarding race, gender, sexual orientation, you cannot truly be trauma informed. Marginalized peoples, those who have been excluded, minimized, and shamed, are traumatized peoples because, as we've discussed, humans are fundamentally relational. To be excluded or dehumanized in an organization, community, or society you are a part of results in prolonged, uncontrollable stress that is sensitizing. Marginalization is a fundamental trauma. This is why I believe that a truly trauma informed system is an anti racist system. All right, he's about to dig in. Season 12. Season 12. The destructive effects of racial marginalizing are pervasive and severe. In North America, Australia, and New Zealand, for instance, Black, brown, and indigenous children are more likely to be overdiagnosed and over medicated in mental health systems. Now, that is a whole book just in that sentence. Overdiagnosed and over medicated. Overdiagnosed and over medicated. And then, because of those two things, removed from their homes to enter the child welfare system. There's a few books out on this about how the child welfare system has now become a place of trafficking children through. Suspended or expelled from school and charged at school with truancy and assault, with the result that they enter the juvenile justice system in disproportionate ways. I had this conversation the other day. I'll finish his statement and I'll go back. He says, as we've talked about, a child with traumatic experiences will often have difficulty learning and also be overactive to the feedback and criticisms that come with struggling in school. This can lead to behavior problems. The behaviors are often misunderstood. So many of the things that people and systems do with good intentions actually cause additional pain for the families and children they're supposed to be serving. Now, I often say that the school to prison pipeline has what I call a threefold cord. That threefold cord is the educator that is not trauma informed and not anti-racist, the school resource officer that is not trauma informed and not anti-racist, and the policies that a school puts out that is not trauma informed and not anti-racist. When those three things coalesce, you're liable to have lots of children pulled into a juvenile justice system. And one of the things that I've realized as someone who has been in education for 23 years now is I've realized that there is a link oftentimes in a community between the educators and the officers, and usually that link is a personal one. Usually it's teachers who are in relationships or even married to officers. I don't know. If I was doing my dissertation, I might do a dissertation on the connection between officers who are married to teachers who work in the same systems. Yeah. We actually saw this, and I was kind of testing my hypothesis on this, but we actually saw this with the shooting. I can't remember the town. I don't want to get the town wrong, but the shooting that happened, Uvalde. The shooting that happened in Uvalde, Texas. A lot of the educators were connected personally to the teachers. Go back and look at the stories surrounding that and the officers that were trying to go into the school and things of that nature. So it can become a deadly cocktail for a child that's caught in between bad policies in a school, a school resource officer that has personal relationship with the educators that are on site. You put those three things together and it is not a good outcome for children. Oprah says this is something I want to discuss in a deeper way. During our 60 Minutes conversation, I realized that so many of the charities and nonprofits out there trying to fix social problems are really only addressing the surface. They're attempting to build the community scaffolding we know is important, but many are missing the causes, the foundations of the problems they're trying to solve. In an after school program, it doesn't understand why a child is experiencing chronic health problems or having trouble keeping up in school. If an unemployment program doesn't figure out why someone is having a hard time with supervisors or always explodes at people, then these programs will not succeed in creating lasting change. Walk us through some of these issues that actually develop and present themselves. So let's start with young children. We've talked repeatedly about the important role of early life relationship in the development of stress response systems and the capacity to form future relationships. We know that when children experience distress and trauma, including poverty, homelessness, domestic violence, and maltreatment, they will have some disruptions in development. Frequently, the result is a splintering of the maturing of specific skills. As we talked about in chapter 6, this has been in relation to neglect. So a 5-year-old child may have only developed the language skills of a 2-year-old and the self-regulation capabilities of a typical 4-year-old. Along with this fragmented development, the child will have an overactive and overly reactive stress response. Now envision this child entering a preschool environment with expectations, with transitions, with rules, and with curriculum designed for the typical 5-year-old. A developmentally uninformed, trauma unaware setting will expect this child to act typical. But that is impossible for the child. The day will be filled with communication difficulties due to their language development and intense frustration due to their self-regulation capabilities. In this overwhelmingly distressing situation, they will shut down or blow up. Either way, they don't get the full benefit of the social, emotional, or academic learning. They fall further behind. They may get kicked out. Many children are expelled from school in pre-K than at any other grade level. Children of color, especially boys of color, are expelled at rates 3 times higher than white children. This is the start of a toxic mismatch between the child's capabilities and these unrealistic expectations of an education system that is all too often under-resourced, developmentally uninformed, and trauma ignorant. Even if the child progresses to the next grade, they are still behind, and this sets them up to fail. Year after year, they fall further and further behind. Their delays in developing skills, together with their trauma-related symptoms, begin to attract mental health labels. The hypervigilance from their sensitized stress response is labeled ADHD. Their predictable efforts to self-regulate themselves by rocking, chewing gum, doodling, daydreaming, listening to music, tapping their pencil, all of these ways that children self-regulate are prohibited. They will be labeled, they will be medicated, then they will be excluded, punished, and perhaps expelled. And then, all too often, arrested after they have been expelled from the place where they're supposed to be during the day. When they try to avoid the constant humiliation of school, they're charged with truancy. When they try to flee and the school staff tries to stop them, a restraint incident results in charges of assault against the child, and sometimes even death because of the brutality of an officer. This is the school to prison pipeline. And add to all this the fact that the student most likely has no idea that there's an underlying cause for their struggles. They end up adopting the world's viewpoint of them, that they are dumb or slow or lazy. It is a cycle of failure that chips away at the self esteem until the student becomes so frustrated or ashamed that they give up. This is such an important point as we close for today. A child who is struggling is not going to say, "This poor teacher simply doesn't understand state dependent functioning and the impact of trauma on my ability to learn. He should be helping me regulate, not conjugate." They say, "Well, I must be dumb." The other really important point about schools is how many children and youth are experiencing learning and behavioral challenges related to trauma. This isn't just a few children. Studies show that between 30 and 50% of children in public schools have three or more adverse childhood experiences. And as we've discussed, these adversities have an impact. Imagine how many children are sitting in school with trauma related memory that can be activated by innocent cues in the classroom. Remember that what we experience in the present moment is filtered by the lower parts of our brain before ever getting to the cortex. All incoming sensory information from the present moment is compared to the memories of your previous experience, no matter who you are or how old you are. It is first processed in the lower part of your brain, the more reactive areas of your brain, before reaching your rational thinking part of your brain. This is why when you hear something, for example, like a car backfiring, if the lower parts of your brain remembers running from gunshots, ducking at gunshots, being in a gunshot environment, guess what is the first thing you are liable to do? You're liable to take off running, or you're liable to jump or duck or get on the ground, because the lower part of your brain is remembering. So it's the remember first, react first, then that travels up your brain to the thinking part or the rationalizing part that helps you to say a few minutes later, "Oh, that wasn't a gunshot. That was just a car backfiring. I have no need to be afraid." But that's not the first part of our brain that responds and reacts. All right. All right. That's fine. So I am stopping right here. If you would like to come on and share really briefly anything that I have talked about today, feel free to join me in conversation. If you are on YouTube, I am normally not on YouTube during the week, but I am coming these last couple of days just to give you an idea of what we share on a regular day-to-day basis during Daring Dialogues. We're coming on the last segment of this season, which is going to be tomorrow. So we'll be ending season 11 tomorrow. However, you can set yourself up to catch us season 12, which is going to start April 3rd, 2023. We'll be on IG at Daring Dialogues. It's the IG page, and we'll be there Monday through Friday from 11 a.m. to roughly 11:45, 12 p.m. All right. If I do not have any guests that will be coming on, I am going to close here today. This has been another episode of Daring Dialogues, and I've been your host, Shantae Charles. Hopefully, I have given you something to think about when it comes to Women's History Month, when it comes to rights of women, and when it comes to being trauma informed. Remember, light is the most daring opposition to darkness. So I encourage you to continue to go out and be light. Stephanie says, people will never know the true norm until there is a disruption of abnormality. That is a very good thought, and we'll leave on that thought today. Again, Cheryl Maring, Blessed Faith Walk. Who else do we have here? Bibliophile Tay. And Pastor Ben, I want to thank you all for joining me live in this discussion, along with Lady Stephanie on YouTube. Last but not least, I do have some things to give away for this month. If you would message me, the first three people who message me your address, you can message me on IG at Daring Dialogues. I will send you a package. Message me your mailing address, and I will send you a Women's History Month package. I have some goodies that I need to give away. All right. Thank you again for your time and attention. Take care, be well, and be light.